Ubisoft blames gamers for failures. Is this fair? Imagine this. A major gaming company known for its blockbuster titles turns around and blames its own customers for the failure of its latest game. Sounds absurd, right? Well, that's exactly what Ubisoft has done. Let's dive into the details and see how this gaming giant is shifting the blame onto gamers. In a surprising turn of events, Ubisoft has publicly responded to the widespread criticism of its recent game releases, attributing their poor performance to negative feedback from the gaming community. Instead of taking responsibility for the quality of their products, the company is defending its titles while addressing the backlash, highlighting how consumer opinions have impacted their market success. In Ubisoft's latest financial report, the company has pointed fingers at Steam, internet trends, and gamers as a whole for the failure of Star Wars Outlaws. But here's where it gets controversial. Ubisoft's CEO, Yves Guillemot, has gone on record saying that the game's failure was due to the lack of popularity of the Star Wars brand at the time of release. He stated, Outlaws was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to was in a bit of choppy waters. But did he miss the massive success of hit Star Wars TV shows like The Mandalorian, Andor, or Tales of the Jedi? It seems like a convenient scapegoat. The financial report also sheds light on Ubisoft's perspective on online criticism. It mentions, Ubisoft is exposed to risks of damage to its reputation resulting from online bashing, understood as massive, sometimes virulent, and organized campaigns of criticism against its products, teams, or public statements. And this is the part most people miss. The report goes on to say that these campaigns can occur on social media, content distribution platforms, or in specialized media, particularly following strategic decisions, technical issues affecting games, or statements perceived as controversial by certain segments of the public. But rather than acknowledging their own missteps, Ubisoft blames content distribution platforms and gamers who criticize their strategic and artistic decisions. Ubisoft seems to be unable to recognize that perhaps the games they have released just haven't been good enough to warrant praise. Instead of taking accountability, they have decided to blame outside factors such as gamers and their customer base. This approach raises some serious questions about corporate responsibility and transparency. How can a company expect to improve if it refuses to acknowledge its own shortcomings? So, what do you think? Is Ubisoft right to blame gamers for the failure of their games? Or is this a classic case of shifting blame? Let's hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe that consumer feedback should be taken into account? Or should companies focus more on internal quality control? The floor is yours. Star Wars Outlaws sequel canceled. What went wrong? The cancellation of the Star Wars Outlaws sequel has sent shockwaves through the gaming community, especially for those who saw potential in this ambitious RPG. But here's where it gets controversial. Despite its initial promise and a dedicated fanbase, Ubisoft reportedly decided to pull the plug on the follow-up after the original game didn't perform well commercially. This raises important questions about how much early sales truly dictate a game's future. Here's what we know. Star Wars Outlaws launched in 2024 and managed to sell a respectable 1 million copies during its first release period. While that might sound like a success on the surface, the reality was harsher. Given the substantial budget invested by Ubisoft, this figure fell short of expectations, making the game a major financial disappointment for the studio. Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot openly addressed this issue in a recent interview with IGN. He pointed out that the game's underperformance was tied less to its quality and more to the troubled state of the Star Wars brand at the time, stating, Outlaws was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to was in a bit of choppy waters. According to a report from well-known industry insider Tom Henderson during the July 24th episode of the Insider Gaming podcast, Ubisoft initially planned to develop a sequel to Star Wars Outlaws. However, the project was reportedly scrapped very early in its pre-production phase. Henderson clarified that the sequel hadn't moved beyond initial planning stages, explaining, Ubisoft also recently canceled Star Wars Outlaws 2 because that was planned and in the works. It wasn't set in stone or in full production. It was very, very early. They looked at Outlaws 2 and thought, let's not do that. This decision, while disappointing, isn't entirely unexpected. Star Wars Outlaws struggled to fully win over fans, partly due to some unpopular design choices that overshadowed its strengths. One of the most criticized elements was the game's forced stealth sections, which many found tedious and disruptive to the overall experience. Ubisoft did release a patch months after launch that completely removed these stealth levels, which significantly improved gameplay for players. Unfortunately, for a large number of fans, this fix came too late. Many had already lost interest or decided to move on. It's truly a pity, because over time the game evolved and improved dramatically. With updates and the release of the Star Wars Outlaws, A Pirate's Fortune DLC, it transformed into a much stronger, more polished title. For those willing to give it a chance, Outlaws offers a rich RPG experience that is also one of the best in capturing the authentic Star Wars lore and atmosphere. This is a big deal, especially for enthusiasts who appreciate a deep dive into the series' expansive universe. The parallels to Sony's Days Gone are apt here. Both games launched amid mixed reactions, yet each went on to receive critical updates that enhanced their quality post-launch. This points to a troubling trend in the gaming industry, where first impressions, made during the initial launch window, can heavily influence a game's fate, sometimes unfairly overshadowing the improvements and long-term potential. While I might be in the minority, I strongly believe Star Wars Outlaws deserves another look from RPG fans and Star Wars aficionados alike. Its initial hurdles shouldn't define its legacy. And who knows? Over time, Outlaws might develop a cult following, much like other underappreciated titles that found their audience years after release. However, with the sequel reportedly canceled, it seems the chances of continuing this storyline in the near future are slim. This brings up an intriguing discussion point. Should studios be so quick to abandon sequels based on early sales numbers, especially when a game shows promise beyond its bumpy start? Could a sequel have helped rehabilitate the brand and satisfy fans craving more content in this unique Star Wars setting? I invite you to weigh in. Do you think Ubisoft made the right call canceling Star Wars Outlaws 2? Or do you believe the game and its sequel deserved more time to flourish? Share your thoughts. This could be one of those debates that reveals just how much expectations and timing influence the destiny of video games today. Why did Star Wars Outlaws fail? Unpacking Ubisoft's blame game. Here's a wake-up call. Ubisoft's recent defense of Star Wars Outlaws' failure might be missing the bigger picture. During a shareholder meeting, CEO Yves Guillemot implied the Star Wars brand itself has lost momentum. But this oversimplifies the true dynamics of a franchise still marked by both high-profile flops and unexpected successes. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The rumors about Outlaws' cancellation and attenuation of its sequel came just months after its 2024 launch. While Guillemot points to Star Wars' current choppy waters, the timing couldn't be more ironic. The summer of 2024 saw two major Star Wars releases: The Acolyte, a $200 million TV show buried in review bombing and cast controversies, and Skeleton Crew, a Stranger Things homage that flopped commercially despite its premise. These events created a firestorm that arguably overshadowed Outlaws itself. But here's the twist. Outlaws' failure isn't just a branding problem. It's a symptom of a bigger complexity in the franchise's current landscape. Consider this. Despite its decline in popularity compared to its 2016 to 2019 peak, Star Wars still exhibits pockets of intense success. Andor Season 2 continues to win critical acclaim and decent viewership even with simultaneous multi-episode releases, while EA's 8-year-old Battlefront 2 sees record-breaking player resurgence. These contrasts reveal Star Wars isn't a monolith. It thrives in certain niches while struggling in others. The real controversy lies in what defines a success. Skeleton Crew's failure to capture audiences, 384 million minutes versus The Mandalorian's 1,032 million, might seem catastrophic, but it highlights a deeper issue: nostalgia versus new territory. Shows like The Mandalorian thrive by blending nostalgia, Baby Yoda, with family-friendly storytelling, a formula that proved irresistible. Contrast this with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka, which leveraged established characters to great success, proving that revisiting beloved icons remains effective. Now the billion-dollar question. Where does Star Wars go next? Disney's recent pivot to films like The Mandalorian and Grogu 2026 and Star Wars Starfighter, Ryan Gosling's rumored vehicle, signals a shift away from the golden age of streaming experiments. However, Andor's prestige drama approach shows there's still appetite for mature storytelling. The challenge lies in balancing this duality without alienating either the family audiences or the hardcore fans. But here's the eye-opener. Star Wars' problem might not be the brand itself, but the lack of clarity in its creative direction. While diverts into areas like espionage, Andor, and tween adventure Skeleton Crew occasionally misfire, they also break new ground. The franchise's most successful entries, The Mandalorian included, don't just tap nostalgia. They create new reasons to care. Grogu's universal appeal, part parent-child bond, part meme culture phenomenon, proved that even old formulas can reinvent themselves. So where does this leave Outlaws? The real debate hinges on whether its failure reflects a systemic brand issue or a strategic misstep. Guillemot's finger-pointing at Star Wars ignores two crucial factors: timing, launching during a media storm, and differentiation, competing against more established sub-franchises. The truth, Star Wars isn't one-size-fits-all, but neither are its challenges. Some projects work because they tap into specific audience needs. Others fail because they don't. The key is understanding which parts of the franchise to nurture and which to reinvent. What approach do you think Disney should take next? Double down on films, lean into prestige TV, or find a new way to balance both? And when it comes to Star Wars creative shifts, where do you stand? Are they desperately needed course corrections or unnecessary risks? Let us know your thoughts below, as this debate is anything but settled.